Number 9. P-40 KITTYHAWK. On June 28, 1942, Royal Air Force RAF Flight Sergeant Dennis Copping was tasked with flying a damaged P-40 KITTYHAWK fighter plane to a British airfield in Egypt for repairs. But it never arrived, and for the next 70 years the aircraft and pilot's fate remained a mystery. A Polish oil worker stumbled upon the wreck in 2012 during a work expedition in the Sahara Desert. Historians described the astonishingly well-preserved aircraft as the aviation equivalent of Tutankhamun's tomb. The plane appeared to be almost frozen in time, with guns and ammo still on board, where they were likely left untouched since the day of the crash. There were even bullet holes in the aircraft's spine, indicating that Flight Sergeant Copping may have had to make an emergency landing after being shot at. On the other hand, the P-40 was already damaged before it took flight, so this may have had something to do with why it crashed. At the time of the discovery, Copping's remains were nowhere to be found. A month later, though, a team of historians found human remains roughly 3 miles from the crash site, along with a piece of torn parachute, a metal button dated to 1939, and a keychain bearing the number 61. It hasn't been confirmed that the remains belong to Copping, but his absence from the wreckage strongly suggests that he survived the crash and perished elsewhere, probably while trying to reach safety. Number 8. A dictator's past. North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un is the third in his family's line of succession to rule the Hermit Kingdom. And while he claims to hail from a prestigious lineage known as the Paek-2 bloodline, a remote cemetery on the South Korean island of Jeju suggests otherwise. Situated on an obscure corner of the island, the graveyard contains at least 13 headstones belonging to Kim's relatives through his mother, Ko Young-hui. Ko was born in 1952 and was of South Korean and Japanese heritage, something the Kim dynasty has avoided confronting, perhaps because they see it as a threat to their legitimacy. But several of Kim Jong-un's maternal ancestors, including his great-grandfather, are buried at the cemetery. Their headstones are old and overgrown, standing in stark contrast to the preserved remains of Kim's father and grandfather, who lie in state at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun in Pyongyang. The graves were discovered in 2014 by South Korean journalists as part of a mission to uncover Kim Jong-un's ancestry. After the media revealed their findings, at least one of the plaques were removed by a distant relative of Kim Jong-un's to prevent vandalism. Number 7. Pine Gap. Deep in the Australian outback, there's a jointly operated U.S. satellite surveillance base and Australian Earth station known as Pine Gap. It's located roughly 11 miles southwest of Alice Springs. It's run by high-ranking personnel from the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, the National Security Agency, NSA, and the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO. There are over 800 employees operating the site, which consists of a massive computer complex that's used for controlling U.S. spy satellites as they pass over the Middle East, China, and Russia's Asian regions, an area spanning roughly 1/3 of the Earth. The remote location was chosen for its strategic significance, mainly the fact that it's too far away for spy ships to intercept its signal. Pine Gap is considered essential to both national and global security. Its intelligence-gathering satellites are used for identifying the location of airstrikes, nuclear weapons, and other military and intelligence sites that U.S. officials think it's in the country's best interest to know about. The name Pine Gap may sound familiar to you. That's because there's a Netflix series with the same name, and it's based on insider information from a 23-year NSA veteran who knows what life is like at the base. Number 6. Mount Weather. Located in rural Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains, the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, also known as the High Point Special Facility, is a high-security government facility that serves as the center of operations for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. The facility also contains a bunker where top-ranking government officials would go in the event of a serious disaster compromising national security, and is an alternate site for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's National Operations Center. The 564-acre site was originally used as a weather station during the 19th century, but the public was largely unaware of its existence until 1974, when news reports emerged about a passenger plane that crashed nearby, bringing the facility into the public eye for the first time. Government officials have activated the emergency use of Mount Weather at least a handful of times, including during a major power outage in Washington, D.C. in 2015. In an interview with NBC Washington's I-Team, Jacob Rosenthal, a former top aide to Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, said that he was sent to the bunker in 1962. He described it as being located in the bowel of the mountain and said it had enough space to accommodate 2,000 top federal officials. Documents obtained by NBC under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, reveal that the facility contains a medical unit, a cafeteria, bunk beds, a wastewater management facility, training rooms, and more. There's not a lot of information about Mount Weather available to the public, and even the people who live in the towns surrounding it know almost nothing about it. Number 5. Hidden ancient settlements. Around 1500 years ago, ancient societies began establishing large, densely populated urban centers in the southwest corner of the Amazon basin. This is a place that, until recently, researchers didn't think anyone used to live in. Much to their surprise, these settlements were incredibly large and complex, complete with miles of elevated roadways and earthen mounds measuring as tall as 72 feet high. A recent study examining the area constitutes the latest findings in a growing body of evidence that parts of the Amazon that were once thought to be untouched were actually home to thriving societies. While it's been known for quite some time that humans have lived in the vast Amazon basin for at least 10,000 years, experts previously believed that all Amazonian people traveled in small nomadic tribes. Early European explorers described seeing villages and towns, but those who came after saw no evidence of these settlements and didn't think the soil was suitable for farming. But in the early 2000s, researchers began to think differently. This was after discovering large populations of domesticated plants and nutrient-rich soil that appeared to be man-made. In recent years, deforestation in the Amazon has revealed large earthen mounds, proving that ancient societies shaped their surroundings. Slowly but surely, evidence of long-term human occupation appeared, but it was difficult to investigate these sites due to the dense vegetation. The most recent piece of the puzzle came thanks to a remote sensing technique called LiDAR, which enables archaeologists to look below the thick plant life and even the soil to identify hidden structures left behind by past cultures. Many mysteries remain regarding the people who lived in these settlements and why they up and vanished at some point in time, but knowing they were there marks a first step to answering these lingering questions. Number 4. Ancient migration route. There are thousands of islands scattered throughout the South Pacific. Some of the first people to travel there were a group called the Lapita, who reached some of the region's farther places around 3,000 years ago. Along with them, they brought their languages, tools, pottery, and domestic animals. But the exact migration patterns of the Lapita are somewhat mysterious. For example, researchers have long believed that they avoided Papua New Guinea, presumably because there were already people living there, but a new study shows that they lived on the southern tip of the landmass on Brooker Island. The oldest layer of sediment at what's known as the Gatunka archaeological site contains the bones of numerous species that the Lapita brought with them, including pigs, dogs, and rats. A more recent layer on top of it was filled with tools and pottery that are specific to the culture, proving that they did settle in Papua New Guinea. Included among the items were obsidian objects sourced from outside the island, as well as blades that may have been used for tattooing. The Lapita's presence was sparse and infrequent at first, but they developed a more permanent presence over time. Evidence shows that they intensified their sea turtle hunting and that their material culture became more complex as the settlement became more established. Humans have inhabited Papua New Guinea for around 50,000 years. Unlike some of the places the Lapita settled, they weren't the first people to arrive there. In fact, their interactions with other cultures may have prompted them to eventually look elsewhere for a place to live. Land researcher Ben Shaw said that the team found the Gatunka site by a seemingly random stroke of luck, along with the local community's help and permission, earning them a distinction as one of the paper's senior authors. Number 3. The world's oldest tree. An Alerce tree that was born at least 5,000 years ago at the beginning of the Bronze Age still stands tall in Chile's Alerce Costero National Park. The species grows incredibly slowly and lives for a very long time. With a trunk diameter of more than 13 feet, the recently discovered specimen's estimated age is based on its massive size. Nicknamed the Alerce Milenario, it's attracted more than 10,000 annual visitors to the park since the remote property was made more accessible in recent years. Unfortunately, many visitors step and climb on the tree's roots, putting its health and life in danger. Environmental scientist Jonathan Barichevich, who conducted a recent study on the Alerce Milenario, said that only around 28% of the tree is actually still alive, and most of its living parts are in the roots where people like to step. He doesn't fault park guests who are unknowingly damaging the tree's last living parts, but he told Newsweek that he considers the tree to be like a family member and that he finds it heartbreaking to see it being actively destroyed. Barichevich comes from a long line of tree protectors, including park rangers who saw it as their duty to ensure the longevity of the forest. In fact, he's so concerned with avoiding any needless damage to the Alerce Milenario that he's avoided carrying out the procedures necessary for determining its true age because doing so could harm the tree. To him, it's not about claiming the title for the world's oldest tree, but estimating its age without jeopardizing its health. Number 2. Prehistoric human tooth. Around 130,000 years ago, or perhaps before then, a young woman lived and died in a remote cave in what is now Laos. In 2018, scientists unearthed one of her molars at the site, known as Cobra Cave. A closer look at the tooth revealed that it didn't come from the modern human species Homo sapiens, but it also didn't resemble the tooth of Homo erectus, an archaic species who was the first among our ancestors to walk upright. But the molar did look like it could belong to a Denisovan, an extinct close relative of modern humans whose DNA has persisted into some of today's populations. Denisovan DNA worked its way into the human genetic code at least 50,000 years ago when they crossed paths with Homo sapiens and mated. And while it hasn't been proven yet that the tooth belonged to a Denisovan, scientists are pretty sure of it. They said that there's a small chance that the molar could have belonged to a Neanderthal, but that it's unlikely. It could also belong to a hybrid individual, in other words, someone of mixed Homo sapiens and Denisovan descent, or perhaps even an unknown hominin group. That, according to archaeologist Katarina Duka, who spoke with CNN. But for now, all signs point toward it being a Denisovan tooth. And if that's the case, it could help to unlock mysteries about the ancient species movement and its intermingling with modern humans. It could be the furthest south that Denisovan remains have been found. All other evidence has put them in North Asia, yet modern genetics indicate that they did migrate south at some point, and the discovery would reinforce that narrative. The team that carried out the original research plans to try extracting DNA from the tooth and to continue excavating at the site in hopes of discovering more clues about what went on there in the distant past. Number 1. Ancient Sandal. In 2019, a hiker discovered a piece of footwear that was obviously very old. He found it on an icy Norwegian mountain pass known as Horse Ice Patch. The hiker notified experts with Secrets of the Ice, who specialize in studying artifacts found in glaciers and ice. By the time archaeologists received the discoverer's photos, GPS coordinates, and report, it was calling for heavy snow in the region. They only had 1 day to go and retrieve the sandal before they ran the risk of having it reburied in snow, possibly for years to come. In what archaeologist Espen Finstead described to Live Science as a long day, a team miraculously managed to recover the footwear. They radiocarbon dated the sandal to around 300 AD and recovered several other artifacts from nearby, including textiles and frozen horse manure. None of the objects are as old as the sandal. Most date to the Viking Age between 800 and 1066 AD. Speaking with Science Norway, Finstead said that he believes the people who traveled the region's routes knew what they were doing, and that the sandal's owner would have lined his or her footwear with fabric, animal skin, or some other material that would make them more wearable in the cold. He theorized that the person may have tossed the sandal aside after it became too damaged to wear anymore. Finstead also pointed out how the remote mountainous region sees little human traffic today, but this was a different story in the prehistoric world. The evidence shows that people were clearly unafraid to travel over long distances and venture into treacherous territory. Thanks for watching. Have you ever discovered something totally crazy in the middle of nowhere? Tell us about it in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.